this college football playoff expansion is not going to happen any sooner than 2026. Georgia made the playoff in 2017, obviously just made it here in 21. If you look in between, you've got teams in 2018, 19, and 20 at Georgia that would have made an 18 playoff, let alone a 12-team playoff. We're in the top 8 in the country, depending on how the system goes. Some, of course, there would have been automatic conference championships awarded and so forth. But just generally, they were a top 8 team those 3 seasons in which they missed the playoffs. And let's see, lost 2 SEC championship games. And then, of course, Florida made it, but they still were a top 8 team at that point. So I find it, as you mentioned to me before we started to record, I find it interesting from the perspective of a fan who would have seen his team make 5 consecutive college football playoffs with an expanded playoff, that you're not necessarily that heartbroken that this thing is not going to be expanded soon.
The college football playoff is something that's going to have impact across the entire landscape. Everybody's going to feel it, no matter what conference you're in. This is likely going to mean that conferences are going to end up with multiple members of their conference in the college football playoff. So, for instance, it's almost guaranteed that the SEC is going to end up with at least 2, if not 3, and possibly 4 quality teams in the college football playoff. Now, you're probably going to get a Big Ten champ, a Big 12 champ, probably an ACC champ, maybe an independent, but the vast majority of those in most years are going to be, in my opinion, filled with an SEC team. And I think that those teams are going to do a pretty good job of handling whoever they play against. I've made no qualms about me, or I've made no bones about me being an SEC homer. I look at the stats, and most people that look at the number of players that go in the NFL and the national championship teams and how well they do, the SEC tends to do very well in those brackets. Last year was a bit of a down year for the bowl season for the SEC, but when you have both teams in the SEC, both teams in the national championship are SEC teams, and the last 3 national champions are SEC champions, and they're all 3 different teams, it tends to say the marketplace is pretty strong in that area. The way I'm looking at it is that it's hard enough to win your division in the SEC. Whether you're in the West or you're in the East, it's hard to win your division. Alabama does a pretty good job, but there's a couple of times during the season they get tried. Last year, they lost to Texas A&M. Was that a fluke? Maybe, but Alabama is going to have problems with LSU from time to time, or a good Auburn team, or a good Texas A&M. Those teams are getting better. Georgia has to get past Auburn every year. We have to get past usually a pretty good Florida or a pretty good Tennessee. Those teams are going to be coming back. They're making the proper coaching changes. So what I look at is whenever I see, okay, Georgia may get into the college football playoff, but we're probably going to end up playing more SEC teams at some point, and that's one more game Georgia has to win a national championship. So if you run through your normal gambit and you play your division, you get to the end of the season, you've got 1 loss. Well, now you got to play, let's say you got to play Clemson. You beat Clemson. Well, then the next round, you probably got to play a SEC team again. You got to beat another really good SEC team. Then, and if you get to a national championship, you got to play another really good SEC team. I would much rather get to a college football berth and have to play a Baylor or an Oregon or some other team that's not an SEC team, because to me, we're more likely to win that game than we are to win against another additional SEC opponent. I think Georgia and Alabama are both in pretty good positions to be proponents for not expanding the SEC to expand the playoffs, because Georgia and Alabama at this point are pretty much on a collision course to play in the SEC championship no matter what happens. After that, it's how many more games do I have to play to win a national championship? And the more games you add to that, the harder it's going to be. So that's my opinion.